Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something about relationships that a lot of people don't understand. Many women believe that if they just love harder, give more, call more, text more, and try harder, a man will finally see their value. But the truth is, the more you chase a man, the less he feels the need to chase you. And when a man stops chasing, he stops appreciating. That's not because he's evil. It's because human nature values what it has to work for. Ladies and gentlemen, let me start by telling you something that most people never talk about when it comes to love and relationships. Everybody thinks the way to keep a man's heart is by giving him more attention, more affection, more messages, more reassurance. Many women believe that if they just show him enough love, enough care, and enough loyalty, he will automatically understand their value and hold on to them tightly. But the truth is, human nature doesn't always work that way. Sometimes the more you give without balance, the less it is appreciated. One of the most powerful forces in any relationship is silence and emotional distance. Now, when I say silence, I don't mean ignoring someone out of anger or trying to punish them. I'm talking about the quiet confidence of a woman who no longer feels the need to chase attention. A woman who understands that her energy is valuable and that it should never be poured endlessly into someone who isn't matching that same level of effort. You see, when a man becomes used to constant attention from a woman, it becomes part of his daily routine. If she texts him every morning, he expects it. If she calls him every evening, he expects it. If she's always the one checking on him, asking how his day went, making sure he feels supported, he starts to see it as normal, not because he's a bad person, but because human beings get comfortable with patterns. Comfort can be a beautiful thing in a relationship, but too much comfort without appreciation can slowly turn into complacency. When a man becomes complacent, he stops feeling the urgency to pursue, to impress, or to protect the connection. He assumes the woman will always be there, always available, always ready to give him her time and attention. But something interesting happens the moment that pattern changes. When a woman stops overextending herself and begins to create emotional space, the man suddenly feels something he hasn't felt in a while, uncertainty. The messages they used to arrive instantly are now delayed. The constant checking in slows down. The energy that once revolved around him begins to shift toward her own life. And the human mind does not like sudden changes and patterns, especially the mind of a man who has grown used to a woman's attention. Now his thoughts begin to wander. He starts wondering why things feel different. He might look at his phone more often than usual, expecting a message that doesn't come. He might start remembering the conversations you used to have or the way you used to show up for him emotionally. This is the moment when silence becomes powerful. Silence forces people to think. When there is constant noise, texts, calls, attention, there is no space for reflection. But when that noise disappears, the mind starts filling in the gaps. Questions begin to appear where certainty once lived. He may begin asking himself things like, why hasn't she reached out today? Or is she busy with something else? Or even, is she starting to move on? And these questions slowly create an emotional pressure inside him. The truth is, absence has a way of revealing value that presence sometimes hides. When someone is always there, their importance can be overlooked. But when that presence is suddenly reduced, the mind begins to measure what might be missing. And that's when memories begin to return. He starts thinking about the way you listened when he talked about his problems. He remembers the way you supported him during stressful moments. He remembers the warmth of your presence, the comfort of your voice, and the way you made him feel understood. At night, when the world becomes quiet and distractions fade away, those memories become louder. A man might find himself scrolling through old conversations or replaying moments in his mind, not because someone forced him to think about you, but because the emotional space you created allowed those thoughts to surface naturally. This is why silence can affect a man in ways he doesn't even fully understand. It touches a part of his mind that constant attention never reaches. But there is something very important that must be understood here. Silence only has power when it comes from self-respect. If a woman withdraws emotionally while secretly hoping the man will chase her, the energy behind that silence becomes weak. It turns into a game instead of a genuine shift. True emotional distance comes from a woman deciding to focus on her own life again. She reconnects with her goals, her passions, her friends, and her peace. She stops making the relationship the center of her universe and starts making herself the center again. And when a woman does that, something changes in her energy. She becomes calmer. She becomes more confident. She becomes less reactive and more grounded. Instead of waiting for a man's attention, she begins creating a life that naturally attracts attention. Men notice this shift more than you might think. A man can feel when a woman no longer depends on him for validation. He can sense when her happiness is coming from within rather than from his approval. That kind of independence creates a powerful emotional pull. Suddenly, the man who once felt comfortable begins to feel curious again. He begins paying closer attention. He starts noticing things he overlooked before. And in many cases, he begins reaching out more, trying to reconnect with the energy that once surrounded him. But the most powerful part of this process is that the woman is no longer acting from a place of need. She isn't withdrawing to manipulate him. She's simply returning to the truth that her life, her happiness, and her peace cannot revolve around someone who isn't fully investing in the relationship. And that quiet confidence creates a kind of emotional gravity. The man begins to feel it late at night when everything is still. He might not be able to explain exactly why he's thinking about her so much. He just knows something feels different, something feels missing. And sometimes that realization can move a man more deeply than all the words, messages, and efforts that once tried to prove her worth. Ladies and gentlemen, let me share something with you that is simple, powerful, and often misunderstood in relationships. One of the biggest mistakes people make in love is forgetting that respect must come before affection. A relationship cannot survive on love alone if respect is missing. And when a woman forgets to respect herself first, it becomes very difficult for a man to truly respect her. Now, I know that might sound a little harsh, but it's the truth. Many women are taught that loving a man means sacrificing everything for him. They believe that if they give him all their time, all their energy, all their patience, he will eventually see how valuable they are. They think if they forgive every mistake, tolerate every delay, and always remain available, the man will finally realize how lucky he is. But the reality is very different. When a person gives endlessly without protecting their own value, they slowly teach others how to treat them. If a man sees that no matter how long he disappears, you will still be waiting. If he notices that no matter how little effort he gives, you will still give more, then over time, he begins to believe that this is the normal dynamic of the relationship. Not because he is trying to hurt you, but because people adapt to the standards that are presented to them. This is why respecting yourself first is one of the most powerful things a woman can do. Self-respect changes the entire energy of a relationship. It sends a message without needing to say a single word. When a woman respects herself, she understands that her time is valuable. She understands that her love is not something that should be handed out carelessly. She understands that being kind and loving does not mean allowing someone to take her for granted. A woman with self-respect does not beg for attention. She does not chase someone who clearly isn't matching her effort. She does not constantly try to prove that she is worthy of love. Instead, she carries herself with quiet confidence, knowing that the right person will naturally recognize her value. And let me tell you something about men. Men pay very close attention to how a woman treats herself. If a woman constantly accepts disrespect, a man unconsciously begins to believe that the behavior is acceptable. But when a woman calmly refuses to tolerate certain things, it creates a boundary that changes how she is viewed. Self-respect is not loud. It's not dramatic. It's not about arguments or ultimatums. It's about consistency in how you value yourself. For example, if a man disappears for days without communicating and then suddenly returns like nothing happened, a woman without self-respect might immediately welcome him back with open arms. She might act like she's just happy to hear from him again. But a woman who respects herself reacts differently. She doesn't explode with anger, and she doesn't beg for his attention either. Instead, she remains calm and grounded. She makes it clear through her actions that her time and emotions are not something that can be treated casually. This kind of response makes a man think, because suddenly he realizes that the woman he is dealing with is not desperate for his attention. She's not sitting around waiting for him to decide when she deserves his time. She has her own life, her own priorities, and her own standards. And something interesting happens when a man encounters a woman like that. He begins to value her more, not because she demanded it, but because her behavior naturally commands respect. Her self-control, her confidence, and her emotional strength create a kind of admiration that cannot be forced. You see, men are naturally drawn to women who have strong self-worth. There is something incredibly attractive about a woman who knows who she is and refuses to settle for less than she deserves. When a woman respects herself, she no longer tries to compete for a man's love. She doesn't compare herself to other women. She doesn't feel the need to constantly prove her worth. She understands that the right person will meet her at her level. And when a man realizes that a woman is not easily replaceable, it changes the way he behaves around her. He becomes more careful with his words. He becomes more thoughtful with his actions. He begins to put more effort into the connection because he senses that losing her would not be easy to recover from. This is why self-respect can affect a man on a deep emotional level. When he sees that a woman values herself, it forces him to evaluate his own behavior. He starts asking himself whether he is truly showing up the way he should. He begins to realize that if he doesn't step up, someone else might recognize her worth and treat her the way she deserves. And that realization can stir powerful emotions inside him, because suddenly he understands that the woman in his life is not someone who will stay forever if she is not appreciated. She is someone who has the strength to walk away if necessary. Now, that doesn't mean she is cold or distant. It simply means she loves herself enough to protect her peace And that kind of energy is incredibly powerful. When a man feels that he is with a woman who respects herself, it makes him want to rise to a higher level. It inspires him to become better, to show more effort, and to protect the connection more carefully. In many cases, this realization doesn't happen immediately. Sometimes it happens slowly. Sometimes it hits him during quiet moments when he reflects on the relationship and recognizes the strength of the woman beside him. But when that realization finally settles in, it can move him deeply because he begins to understand that he is not just dealing with a woman who loves him. He is dealing with a woman who loves herself just as much. Ladies and gentlemen, there's something very powerful that happens in relationships when a person finally feels the absence of someone who truly cared for them. Many people do not fully understand the value of what they have while it is constantly present in their lives. When someone is always available, always supportive, always showing love and attention, it can slowly become something that feels normal. It becomes part of the routine of life, something that is expected rather than deeply appreciated. Human nature often works this way. When something is always within reach, the mind stops recognizing how special it really is. But the moment that presence is reduced or removed, the emotional weight of that person begins to reveal itself. This is why letting someone feel your absence can be one of the most powerful emotional experiences in a relationship. Now understand this clearly. Letting someone feel your absence does not mean disappearing out of anger or playing childish games. It means stepping back from overextending yourself and allowing the natural balance of the relationship to reveal itself. When a woman constantly fills every space with her attention, her care, and her effort, the man never has the opportunity to feel what life is like without that energy. But when she pulls back and focuses on her own life, something interesting begins to happen inside the mind of the man. The silence that replaces her constant presence creates room for reflection. Suddenly, the emotional comfort he once felt from her begins to feel distant. He may notice small things at first. Maybe his phone feels a little quieter than usual. Maybe the conversations that once filled his day are no longer there. Maybe the emotional support he relied on during stressful moments is no longer immediately available. These changes might seem small on the surface, but the human mind is very sensitive to emotional shifts. When a person who once brought warmth, understanding, and attention into your life becomes less present, you begin to feel that difference. And this feeling does not always appear immediately. Sometimes it grows slowly over time. A man might start remembering the little things about the woman who used to be constantly present in his life. The way she listened when he talked about his challenges. The way she encouraged him when he doubted himself. The way she laughed at his jokes or understood his moods without needing a long explanation. These memories begin to appear naturally when the distractions of daily communication are gone without constant messages or inactions. The mind begins filling the quiet space with reflection. Late at night is often when these thoughts become strongest. When the world becomes calm and there are fewer distractions, the mind has time to wander. A man might suddenly think about conversations he had with her weeks ago. He might remember how she supported him during a difficult moment or how she celebrated his small victories. And as these memories return, a realization slowly begins to form. He starts to recognize that the presence he once took for granted was actually adding emotional value to his life. The warmth, the encouragement, the companionship, All of it begins to feel more meaningful once it is no longer constantly available. This is the moment when absence becomes powerful. Because when someone is always there, their presence blends into the background of everyday life. But when that presence fades, the emotional impact becomes impossible to ignore. A man might find himself checking his phone more often, wondering if she has reached out. He might scroll through old messages or revisit memories that once felt ordinary. He might even feel a quiet sense of restlessness without fully understanding where it is coming from. The reason is simple. He is experiencing the emotional space that her absence created. And within that space, appreciation begins to grow. Sometimes this realization can create a deep emotional reaction. A man may begin to feel regret for moments when he didn't fully appreciate her attention. He may start questioning whether he showed enough effort or gratitude while she was consistently showing up for him. These thoughts can become surprisingly powerful, especially if the woman brought genuine positivity into his life. When someone provided real emotional support and care, their absence leaves a noticeable gap, but there is another important aspect to this process. When a woman allows a man to feel her absence while she continues living her life confidently and peacefully, it changes how he perceives her. Instead of seeing her as someone who revolves around him, he begins to see her as someone who has her own world. She becomes more intriguing because her life is no longer centered entirely on him. Her time is no longer constantly available, and that naturally increases the value of the moments they do share. Men are often drawn to women who have their own sense of purpose and independence. When a woman is busy growing, pursuing her interests, and living a fulfilling life, it creates a kind of energy that is very attractive. It shows that her happiness does not depend entirely on one person. And when a man recognizes that the woman who once gave him so much attention is now focusing on her own growth and peace, it can spark a powerful emotional response inside him. He may begin wanting to reconnect with her more deeply. He may start putting more effort into communication or making plans to spend time together, not because he was forced to do so, but because the absence allowed him to recognize the emotional value she brought into his life. This is why absence can sometimes reveal truths that constant presence hides. It gives people the opportunity to see clearly what role someone played in their life. It allows appreciation to grow naturally rather than being forced through words or reminders. And when that appreciation finally settles into a man's mind and heart, the emotions that follow can be very real and very powerful because he begins to understand something important. Life felt better when she was there. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a powerful truth about relationships that many people only realize after they have experienced heartbreak or loss. The truth is that the most unfold. Credible woman in a man's life is not the one who begged him to stay, not the one who chased him endlessly, and not the one who tried to convince him of her value. The woman a man fears losing the most is the woman who knows exactly who she is and refuses to settle for less than she deserves. Becoming a woman that a man fears to lose is not about manipulation or playing games. It's about developing a level of confidence, independence, and emotional strength that naturally commands respect. When a woman reaches that level, her presence becomes something rare and meaningful. She is not easily replaced because the energy she brings into a relationship is built on self-worth rather than insecurity. Many people misunderstand what makes someone truly attractive in a long-term relationship. They think it is about beauty alone or about constantly pleasing the other person. While attraction and kindness are important, what truly holds a man's attention over time is the feeling that the woman he is with has a life, a purpose, and a sense of value that exists beyond him. When a woman builds a life she is proud of, something changes in the way people see her. She carries herself differently. She speaks with calm confidence. She moves through the world knowing that her happiness is not dependent on someone else's approval. This kind of energy is extremely powerful. When a man sees that a woman has her own goals, her own passions, and her own direction in life, he begins to view her differently. She is no longer just someone he spends time with. She becomes someone he respects deeply because she represents strength and balance. A woman who fears losing a man often adjusts her entire life around him. She cancels her plans when he suddenly becomes available. She prioritizes his needs above her own dreams. She makes sure he always feels comfortable, even when she herself feels neglected. But a woman who understands her worth behaves differently. She does not abandon her life for a relationship. Instead, she invites the relationship to become part of the life she is already building. Her goals continue moving forward. Her friendships remain important. Her personal growth never stops. And when a man sees that the woman he cares about is constantly evolving, constantly growing, constantly improving her life, something powerful happens inside him. He realizes that she has options, not because she is threatening him or trying to create jealousy, but because her confidence, intelligence, and independence naturally attract attention and respect from others. A woman who values herself sends a silent message that she will not remain in a situation where she is not appreciated. That realization can be very impactful for a man. When a man believes that a woman will stay no matter how he behaves, he may slowly become careless with the relationship. He may stop putting in the effort he once did. He may assume that her loyalty means she will always be there regardless of how much attention he gives her. But when he understands that the woman in his life has the strength to walk away if she is not valued, his mindset begins to change. He starts recognizing that her presence is not guaranteed forever. And that realization creates a sense of urgency. Suddenly, he wants to invest more in the relationship. He wants to show appreciation more often. He becomes more aware of how his actions affect her because he understands that losing her would not be a small loss. When a woman reaches this level of self-worth, she also stops trying to compete for love. She does not compare herself to other women or worry about proving she is better than anyone else. Instead, she focuses on being the best version of herself. Her energy becomes calm rather than deep. Spirit. Her affection becomes genuine rather than forced. Her presence becomes peaceful rather than demanding. Men feel this difference very clearly. A peaceful woman who respects herself brings a kind of emotional stability that many men crave but rarely experience. Being around her feels supportive rather than stressful. Conversations feel meaningful rather than dramatic. And because she is not constantly seeking validation, the attention she gives becomes more meaningful. When she expresses appreciation, it feels sincere. When she offers encouragement, it feels authentic. It feels authentic. Over time, a man begins to realize that the woman he is with is not just someone who cares about him. She is someone who elevates his life. She inspires him to become better because her own life reflects discipline, purpose, and emotional maturity. This is when the fear of losing her begins to grow. Not a fearful panic, but a deep awareness that the relationship is valuable and should not be taken lightly. He understands that women with this level of confidence and integrity not stay in environments where they are not respected. He knows that if he becomes careless or neglectful, she will eventually choose her peace over the relationship. And that knowledge can create powerful emotions inside a man. He may find himself thinking about her more often, appreciating her presence more deeply, and recognizing how rare it is to find someone who combines love with self-respect. The truth is that people protect what they believe is valuable. When a woman becomes someone who radiates confidence, independence, and kindness at the same time, she becomes incredibly valuable in a man's eyes.